Hey everybody, Danny Maude here. Thanks for joining us. What a great opportunity it is right now to work on our ball striking, specifically this week with our fairway woods. How often have you been out on that golf course and you found that you're dribbling your fairway woods along the ground? You're hitting the shots and they're basically just topping and they're going along the ground. You're not getting any power, and it's so frustrating, isn't it, after probably a really great drive just to see the second shot dribble along that ground. Well, in this week's training, I'm going to give you two concepts. One is what I call mind the gap. I'm going to show you, if you understand how to mind the gap, you can pretty much eliminate most of your top shots. And the second thing is a simple one, which is learning to feel where this club face is at the moment it approaches impact. If you can do those two things, you can pretty much eliminate that top for good. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this week's training. Of course, look, before I do, if you're new to the channel and this is one of your first videos of mine, hop into the community by pressing that subscribe button and the bell so I can notify you every time I release a video just like this one. So, top shot, well, I've given you an indication of what it looks like, what's generally happening with a top. So let's get straight into the training. So ultimately, what most people are doing when they're topping, they're hitting the bottom part of this golf club here. So the ball, when you're striking the ball, you're striking it with the bottom part. But why is that? Now, what's tending to happen is when people get here, there's often a big point of this. They're often either standing up, so you're getting too high through the ball, and there's a reason for that. Or the second thing, what's happening is you're coming around here and you're coming down on top of the golf ball. Two of the major things that are generally happening, I see when people are topping it. So the very first thing I want you to do is mind the gap. One of the reasons why you're probably standing up is because you just don't have enough space. So your body's smart and your body goes, look, I haven't got enough space through the impact area, so I'm going to stand up. Why is that? Well, watch this. What I want to see in the backswing is I want to see your right hip going backwards. Watch this. As I start to swing backwards here, I'm going to push my backside so it starts to go this way. As I do that, I've created all this space. Now what I want to do now is I want to mind the gap. I've created this gap here, this space. I want to mind it. And what I'm going to do on the way down is I'm going to push my lead hip backwards as well. And now I've created all this space. And I want you to mind the gap. This is a gap, we want to mind it as we're coming through. So watch this. I'm going to create the space on the way back by pushing this back. I'm going to keep that space on the way down. And now I can stay in posture over the top of the golf ball. Easily, I'm going to get to the bottom of that golf ball. Watch this. If I don't push this back here, I get to this position here and there's not a lot of space. So my body goes, okay, there's not a lot of space. It's pretty smart. I can't hit a golf ball from there. I'm going to stand up. That's one thing it could do. The second thing it could probably do is if you don't create enough space here, your body goes, oh, what am I going to do now? Well, that's easy. I'll come around there. I'll create space this way. So usually, again, remember, your body's pretty smart. And it will try to come up with various different solutions simply to hit the ball. What we want to do is make sure we give it the easiest solution possible by minding that gap. So let's have a look at this, and this is how I'd like you to start with it. Get yourself set. You don't necessarily even need a golf ball initially. All you do is when you start to take the club back, you want to get the sensation that you're simply going straight back. If you haven't seen my video on how to get correct rotation in the golf swing, really worth a look because it'll complement this training. I'll put a link in the description below and up in this top right hand corner too. Definitely worth a look. Correct rotation, often misunderstood. But what we're going to do, we're going to create that space. We're going to push this back here. We've created the space. Now we don't want to then thrust that space and let it disappear now, because when we'll stand up again, what we're going to do is we're going to keep that space by simply now moving the left pocket backwards. Now we've got that space, we can keep our height over the golf ball without standing up, and we've got a better opportunity to strike that ground and get the club entering much, much lower to the ball here as opposed to there. So have a look at this. Create the space, maintain that space. Do a few swings, just practicing. You can do this in your garden, off a mat, and then grab a golf ball. Now, I suggest, and we're going to do this in a second, I'm using real balls here because I've got a net, but I've also brought out these balls. If you've never seen these balls before, these rainbow balls, they basically travel maybe 20, 30 yards maximum. They're super light. They won't cause any damage. You can practice this in your garden. I'm going to show it in a second. Works an absolute treat, and it'll give you immediate feedback as to where you're topping it or striking it well. So let's have a look at this in action now. I'll get ourselves set, and I'm going to create the space, mind that gap, okay? Just nice and small, and away we go, okay? Simple as that. Just create the space, keep the space. Or I like to call it mind that gap. push back, mind the gap. Right, so you're starting to understand that in ultimately the golf swing is simply pushing this bit back here and then this bit back here. So you've got your trail hip going backwards, you've got your lead hip going backwards. This creates space, enables you to keep your angle of the golf ball. If you create the space, you don't need to then lift up nowhere near as much, okay? So you're just keeping that down. If you keep down, what's gonna happen if you keep down? As opposed to this club going up and hitting the top of the ball, it now can stay low to the ground. Huge advantage. So you've now got to get the rhythm and the timing of this and get the feel of this. So what I would do before you hit a golf ball is simply, we've done the exercise here, you've got feel for that, now you've got to get the timing. So watch this. We create the space by that right hip going backwards here. We then maintain the space by pushing this one back and then through. Now there's a timing of this, watch this. The rhythm is this. We push back and watch this. Hip goes back, we create the space, we swing the club. We create the space, we swing the club. What we don't do is this. We don't create the space with our right side and then hit here. It's always this timing. Create the space, swing the club. You can do it slowly initially until you get a rhythm of this. So just keep going. Nice and easy. 1 and 2. Notice how this will always go down. It's the most natural thing in the world to do. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. I'll create the space and I'm minding this gap. I'm being careful not to thrust my way here or close that gap down. I'm minding that gap and keeping the gap, and away we go. Now's the time to introduce the ball. Now, as I said, I'm using these rainbow balls, wonderful for the garden because they're not going to cause any damage, they don't go very far, and look, you top it, but you can really get great feedback from these. So let's have a look at this in action here. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to get myself set. And one of the key ingredients for this, we may hit a few shots just doing this. We're going to push it back and mind that gap, okay? Now you do that a few times, but you still might get not the strike that you want. You've maintained this, so we're well on our way, but there's one more ingredient that you might need to look at. That in itself could be curative and you start ripping it brilliantly well. If it's not, then it's possibly down to one final thing. A flicking motion through the impact area. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of people feel like they know if the ball goes along the ground, it's instinctive, isn't it, to try to get the ball up in the air. But we don't want to do that. We want to get the ball up in the air. We realize that the ball goes up in the air because it hits the face of the club. It's the face that has the loft. So if you start to get into a flicking motion like this, the loft goes to the sky, but it then presents the leading edge of the club here to the ball. There's no loft on this leading edge. This will literally hit the top of the ball and get the ball rolling along the ground. So we need to, funnily enough, which is counterintuitive, which does feel a bit weird, we have to almost lean the face down towards the ball. So counterintuitive, isn't it? But it works. Lean the face down. Now, to do this, you're going to need to feel it and experience it. So what I suggest you do is this, something you can do indoors initially. So you basically do this. Put the club down, ball down, and what we're going to do is we're going to create the space, and now what we're going to do is we're going to use our hand. Now, if you're right-handed, playing golf right-handed, fantastic, but if you're left-handed playing golf right-handed or vice versa, just simply alternate the hand, it doesn't matter. We're going to make the move, we're going to create the space, mind the gap, and now watch this. For you flickers out there, if you're flicking the ball, the hand will quickly face the sky. What we're going to do, just do that a few times, get the hand flicking to the sky. This will create a top-style shot. Then what you do is just keep going, working on that rhythm and timing, and just start to, in a sense, start to get the hand just naturally flicking later. So yes, of course the hand is going to eventually do this, but if it does it too early, it leads to a top. If it does it a little bit later, look like this, look at the difference here. Yes, I'm going to flick it later, but now I've got the feeling that the hand is just facing the ground for a little bit longer in this whole rhythm. Now what we do is we take the fairway wood. You've now got the sensation. Let's do the same thing. So we're minding the gap, and now what we're going to do is we're going to practice flicking it first. Flicking it first. You see the difference? So I'm flicking it here. This will lead to a top shot and a really poor strike, often hitting the ground behind the golf ball. But at least get a feel for what that's supposed to be like. Then, just do a little bit less look. You see the difference? And then of course the flick will come in later, but by then look, you've de-lofted the club, you've got the face angle naturally down. So you're developing a feel for this. You can also do this with a mobile phone as well. So you can get yourself set up here. use your mobile phone as a guide. You could simply just get the mobile face of the phone, point to the sky for a top style shot, and then learn the feel of the opposite to that. Understanding or experiencing the contrast between a flick is really important. Trying to just do it correctly straight off the bat, the body doesn't like that. The body loves contrast. It loves to try to get a feel of what's right and wrong. So doing it wrong is a great way to feel, okay, that's a flick, and what's a little bit less than that? And all it is now is just learning to experience that. So we're minding the gap, we're getting a sensation now, we've got these nice easy balls that we can hit. Let's have a look at this. So 1, 2, and I might just do some small little swings to start off with, no full swings, just literally trying to get that face on that ball with this timing. Mind the gap, and away we go, okay? Let's have another look at that in action. Get ourselves set. Great, mind the gap, get that sensation of where that face is supposed to be here. And it's as simple as that. So I'm going to summarize exactly what we've done in a PDF document that you can download below with a practice plan that you can actually use right now. If you're able to get on the golf course, fantastic. If not, in your garden, it'll cover all those bits and pieces, so you can just simply download it. It's completely free. But let's just summarize what we've just done. 2 things that really cause top shots. We know if you don't have enough space for impact, your body's going to respond by doing probably a couple of things. It's either going to stand up to create space, or it's going to create space around here. Neither way is going to be good for consistency. You're going to lead to some poor strikes and plenty of top shots. So what have you got to do? You've got to mind the gap. You've got to create that space. How do we do this? We create the space by pushing this right hit back here, and then minding that space. Mind the gap by pushing then the lead hit back. Creating that space means that you can keep your body over the golf ball. It doesn't need to create space incorrectly by doing this, often leading to tops, therefore getting the club much lower to the ground. Hugely, hugely important. I've got more details on the rotational aspect to this and the misconception in the description below, so check that out. Then we said, look, once you've got that sensation, then clearly you're going to need to kind of build a rhythm for this. You can just hit some small shots initially, just going 1 and 2, just getting that sensation. You don't have to rush this. Brilliant with like plastic golf balls or whatever you can do in your garden right now. Absolutely perfect. Then we said, look, you've got to get a feel of that club face. When you're here, if you're doing all this and you're still topping it, the chances are you just don't have quite the feel of this. We said, look, if you're flicking the golf ball here or flicking the wrist here, that is going to get the loft coming up and get you hitting the leading edge. So you've got to learn to feel where that face is. Use contrast. Maybe even hit a few balls incorrectly by actually topping them on purpose, like that, so you can feel what that flick feels like, and then bit by bit, start to get the sensation that that hand stays a little bit down for a little bit longer here. You're still, of course, it's still naturally flowing. It's just about getting the timing. Flick too early, you top it. Flick a bit later here, and you'll generally strike it. Could you bring that face to the golf ball? So, like I say, I'll put a downloadable link where you can download a practice plan that you can use in your garden right now. It's completely free, down in the description below. But look, if you enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and maybe share it with some of your friends who could do with a little bit of help. Maybe you've seen them on the golf course, topping it, or you're getting ready for next, when we finally get released from this thing. And of course, look, if you're new to the channel and you want to join me next week, press that subscribe button and the bell. But until next week, have a great golfing week.